Stop there, right now. Django, the street leader, stepped in front of a tired man with a tattered blue t-shirt and muddy slippers. The man's name was Johnson. He kept his head down, his beard rough, his hair overgrown, his belly empty. You have the mind to pass here and refuse to greet us? Django growled. He slapped Johnson's chest. The dirty clothes stuck to his palm. Kneel down. Johnson did not kneel. Django flashed an angry smile and tore the front of Johnson's coat. The cloth ripped with a loud sound. Gasps rose from the crowd as the cold air hit Johnson's dirty white inner shirt. Django rolled his shoulders, ready to make the homeless man a lesson. What happened next, no one in that street could ever forget. Johnson stepped back, as if scared. He lowered his eyes. He let his shoulders drop. He looked like he wanted to run. Django rushed. In a blink, Johnson's body changed, his feet planted, his back straightened, his hands locked around Django's waist in one smooth move. Johnson lifted the muscular street leader off the ground as if Django weighed nothing, until Django's feet were above Johnson's head. Wait, Django cried. His voice broke. The man everyone feared was in the air, kicking at nothing, hands shaking like loose leaves. You don't know who I am, Johnson said, his voice calm and strong. You think you can intimidate everyone, not me. The crowd went silent. I can fling you, Johnson said, steady as a drumbeat, and that could be your end. Django began to beg. His face lost all its pride. Please, please. His voice was small now. Johnson set him down, every motion controlled, like he was placing a baby in a crib. Django's knees failed. He dropped to the dusty ground. He bowed. The man who bullied the whole street put his forehead to the dirt and begged a homeless man for mercy. Johnson took one step back and raised his hand to the crowd. If he ever intimidates anyone again, he said, his eyes moving from face to face, I live under the Oshodi Bridge. Call me. The crowd erupted, some clapped, some shouted, some just stared. Men who used to cross the road to avoid Django let out the breaths they had held all year. Women with market baskets stood taller. Teen boys who had copied Django's swagger looked down at their feet. At the edge of the crowd, a black SUV waited with the engine purring. Inside, a woman had watched everything, her hands tight on the steering wheel. She wore a clean white blouse and simple gold earrings. Her name was Cynthia Brown. Most people knew the Brown name. Brown Automobile, late Chief Brown Williams. Big contracts, big donations, big headlines. But no one knew that 3 weeks ago, on this same street, Django had stopped her car and leaned his elbows on her window. Nice SUV, he had said, smiling without humor. One night I will visit. She had reported him. The police said they would look into it. Nothing happened. Now she pushed her door open and stepped into the rain. Excuse me, she called. Johnson turned, surprised. Please wait, she said, walking toward him. People moved aside without being asked. Cynthia stopped in front of Johnson. Up close, she saw more than dirt. She saw eyes that were steady and a kind of quiet sadness that did not shake, even in a crowd. My name is Cynthia Brown, she said. Cynthia Brown of Brown Automobile. Her voice wobbled just once. She steadied it. Thank you for what you just did. Johnson blinked. Ma, you're welcome. That man, Cynthia lowered her voice, threatened me. He told me he would come to my home. I reported him. Nothing changed. Today you made a change, and I'm grateful. Johnson looked past her to where Django still knelt, wet and small. Django's boys, usually loud, hid behind a shop awning and pretended to be busy on their phones. Cynthia glanced at Johnson's torn coat and the shiver in his hands. She made a choice. I want to talk to you properly, she said. Can you follow me to my home so we can talk? Please. Johnson's eyebrows pulled together. Your home? Yes, I'll explain on the way. She drew a breath. I need help. Real help. Not from people who pretend and run at the first sign of trouble. From someone who stands. The word home worked on Johnson like a switch. In his mind, a door opened to rooms he once had. A clean bed, a warm light, a quiet corner where he used to keep medals he no longer wore. Another door opened to cold iron bars, long nights, and the voice that said, case adjourned again and again until his life fell apart. He looked down at his torn t-shirt. He smelled damp cloth and diesel. He remembered the underbridge, the wind that cut through his bones at night, the laughter of boys who had too much free time, the pity in the eyes of people who gave him food and would not ask his name. Rain had started drizzling. Behind Cynthia, the SUV driver stepped out and held an umbrella over her head. "Please," Cynthia said again, softer now. "Just hear me out. I promise I mean no harm." Johnson searched her face. He saw fear there, yes, but not only fear. He saw a kind of tired courage. The courage of someone who had been strong for too long. The crowd watched, waiting for the next surprise of the day. "Okay," Johnson said at last, and the word felt heavier than it sounded. "I will follow you." Cynthia's shoulders dropped with relief. "Thank you." She nodded toward the SUV. "Let's go." As they turned, Django scrambled to his feet, eyes burning with shame. He opened his mouth to speak, maybe to curse, maybe to threaten, but the sound of a siren yawned from the far end of the street. A police truck rolled into view, lights flashing, tires spraying water. Heads turned, shopkeepers pulled in their goods, children pressed closer to their mothers. 2 officers jumped down. They didn't rush. They walked like people who wanted to be seen doing their jobs. One officer looked at Django, then at Johnson, then at Cynthia's SUV. "Good afternoon," the officer said, voice flat. "We heard noise." "No noise here," someone muttered. The officer's eyes slid back to Django. The street leader wiped mud from his knees and tried to stand tall again, but his legs still shook. Cynthia stepped forward, rain speckling her blouse. "Officer, we actually need your help," she said calmly, careful and clear. "A report was made about this man threatening me 3 weeks ago. Brown automobile. Case number," she named it from memory, each digit steady. The officer's jaw tightened. His partner glanced at the truck. The street held its breath. Johnson watched the officers, the crowd, the man who had torn his coat. His hands curled and uncurled at his sides. He felt the old heat in his chest, the one he had buried under hunger and dust. He did not want trouble. He did not want more police or more rooms with bars. He just wanted to leave this street with the little dignity he had left. "Sir," the first officer said to Johnson, "we'll need a statement." Cynthia looked at Johnson. The umbrella shook slightly in the driver's hand. Rain hit harder. The siren clicked off, but its echo hung in the air. Johnson's eyes moved to the SUV door that stood open like a promise. Then back to the officers, who could turn today into another long night. Then to Django, who stared at him with a strange mix of fear and something darker. "Ma," Johnson said to Cynthia, voice low, "if I enter that car, there is no going back for me." Cynthia nodded. "If you enter, there is no going back for me either." The officer cleared his throat. "We're waiting." Johnson lifted his chin, and then behind the police truck, 3 motorcycles swung onto the street, engines growling, helmets down, jackets black and shiny with rain. The lead rider pointed at the crowd, then at Johnson. The street froze. Johnson took one slow step forward. "Officer," he said, his voice calm as the first moment, before a storm breaks. "Decide fast." The motorcycles revved. The umbrella slipped. The rain was still falling when Johnson entered the black SUV. The leather seat under him felt strange, too soft after months of cold concrete. He sat stiffly, his torn coat clutched tight against his chest, as if afraid it might vanish if he let go. Cynthia gave a small smile. "Relax," she said gently. "You're safe here." The car pulled away from the noisy street, leaving behind the stunned faces of people who had just watched Django, the most feared man in the neighborhood, get lifted like a sack of yam by a homeless stranger. The wipers swept back and forth, slicing through the rain as they drove toward Ikoyi. Johnson looked out the window. Each street they passed grew cleaner, brighter. The smell of smoke and garbage faded into perfume and rain-soaked asphalt. His eyes flickered to the tall buildings and wide gates, signs of a world that used to be his. He swallowed hard. Cynthia noticed his silence. "You live under the Oshodi Bridge, right?" He nodded, still watching the road. "Do you have family there?" He shook his head. "No family anywhere." Something in the way he said it made her turn toward him. His voice carried a kind of quiet that sounded like loss too heavy for words. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He turned slightly, meeting her eyes for the first time. "You don't have to be sorry, Ma. Life is what it is." They drove in silence again. The hum of the engine filled the space between them. After a few minutes, Cynthia spoke. "You handled Django like..." Like a trained fighter. Who taught you that? Johnson hesitated. His fingers rubbed the torn edge of his sleeve. It's a long story. I've got time, she said. He looked at her, unsure whether to trust this woman who spoke with calm confidence but whose eyes hid a hint of fear. Before he could answer, the SUV slowed and stopped in front of a bright barber shop at Lekki, Phase 1. Let's get you cleaned up first, Cynthia said. Then we'll talk. Johnson blinked. You don't have to do this. I want to, she said. Please. Inside the shop, the barber stared in shock at Johnson's hair, wild, matted, and tangled. But he said nothing, just nodded respectfully when he saw Cynthia. Minutes later, clumps of Johnson's hair fell to the floor. The mirror began to show the face of someone he barely recognized. His beard trimmed, his face washed, the dirt of the streets gone. When he stepped out, Cynthia's eyes widened. She hadn't expected the transformation to be this powerful. Under the streetlight, Johnson looked 10 years younger. His jawline was sharp, his eyes clear. He wore a plain white t-shirt and new black trousers from the supermarket next door. For a moment, Cynthia forgot the rain, the noise, the fear. Her breath caught. You look different, she said quietly. Johnson smiled faintly. I haven't looked in a mirror in months. They continued their journey. As they entered her mansion compound, the security gates slid open, revealing a long driveway lined with glowing garden lights. The guards bowed slightly as the SUV passed. Johnson's heart pounded. He used to have men like these once. Now he was being helped into a house that reminded him of the one he lost. Cynthia led him through the front door. The living room was massive white marble floors, chandeliers, soft music humming from hidden speakers. A huge portrait of her late father hung on the wall. Chief Brown Williams, the man behind Brown Automobile. You can stay here, she said, pointing to a guest room down the hall. Get some rest. Food will be sent to you soon. Johnson hesitated. Thank you, Ma. You've done more than enough. You saved my life today, she said, smiling faintly. We're even. That night, as rain tapped against the windows, Johnson lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The bed was soft, too soft. He kept thinking of the street, of Django's shocked face, of Cynthia's calm courage, but mostly, he thought of the past. The next morning, sunlight poured into the mansion. Cynthia called him into her study, a cozy room lined with books and framed photos. She motioned for him to sit. I couldn't sleep, she said. I kept thinking about you. Johnson smiled politely. I didn't sleep much either. Tell me, she said, leaning forward. Who are you really, Johnson? He sighed. You really want to know? Yes. Johnson took a deep breath. I was once a fighter, a black belt champion. Not just in Nigeria. I competed internationally. People used to know my name. Cynthia's eyes widened. What happened? Jealousy, he said simply. People I trusted set me up. One morning, I woke up to find a dead man in front of my house. I didn't even touch him. Before I could call anyone, police came. They said I killed him. I spent years in prison, sold everything to prove my innocence. When I got out, he paused, his voice breaking slightly. My parents were gone. My friends disappeared. My house, my cars, all gone. I had nothing left. Silence filled the room. Cynthia's eyes glistened. I'm so sorry, she whispered. He gave a small smile. It's all right. Life moves on. No, she said firmly. You don't deserve to be on the streets. Not after everything. He looked down. Sometimes, life doesn't give second chances. Cynthia stood and walked to the window. Then maybe I can help change that. She turned back to him. Johnson, I want you to work for me. Be my chief security officer. You'll handle both my company and this house. Johnson's eyes widened. Ma, that's too much. I can't. Yes, you can, she interrupted softly. You're strong, disciplined, and I trust you. I haven't trusted anyone in years. He tried to protest, but she lifted her hand. Please, say yes. Johnson's chest tightened. The words felt strange in his mouth, but they came anyway. Yes, Ma. Cynthia smiled, a real, unguarded smile. Good. Welcome home. As Johnson left the study, the same driver who had brought him in whispered to a maid, Madam, never trusts anyone that quick. The maid replied, Maybe this man is different. Outside, a black car parked quietly across the street. Inside sat Django, a bruise still purple on his face. He watched the mansion gates close and whispered under his breath, "We'll see who wins next time." And somewhere in the shadows of Lagos, a new storm began to rise. Morning sunlight spilled across the front steps of Cynthia's mansion as two security guards stood at attention. For the first time in months, the compound was quiet, no unwanted visitors, no threats, no sleepless nights for Cynthia. Johnson adjusted his black security jacket and clipped his new ID card to his chest. It read in bold letters, Chief Security Officer Brown Automobile. He ran his hand across the shiny card. His fingers trembled slightly. A few months ago, he was sleeping under the Oshodi Bridge, counting the days by the sound of passing buses. Now, he was walking through the polished marble hallways of a billionaire's mansion. Cynthia watched from the balcony above, a faint smile on her face. She couldn't explain it. Something about Johnson's calm strength made her feel safer than all the bodyguards she had ever hired. By afternoon, Johnson was already in full control of the mansion's security. He inspected the CCTV feeds, tested the alarm systems, and even trained the guards on discipline and response. His tone was calm, firm, and confident, a leader's voice. "Never let fear control your eyes," he told them. "A guard who blinks first loses everything." The younger guards listened with deep respect. Word spread fast among the staff. Madam's new chief was no ordinary man. That same evening, Cynthia returned from a company board meeting. She found Johnson waiting by the gate. "How was your day, Ma?" he asked politely. She smiled. "Tiring, but I feel safer coming home now." Johnson bowed slightly. "That's my job." "Not just your job," she replied. "It's who you are." Her words lingered in his heart long after she had gone inside. But while peace filled the mansion, danger brewed beyond its walls. Django hadn't forgotten his humiliation. The memory of being lifted above the crowd still burned like fire. His boys mocked him behind his back, calling him the flying street leader. He gathered them one night at a beer joint near Oshodi. His face was hard, his voice cold. "That man, the one who embarrassed me," Django said, tapping the table. "He's working for that woman now, the same rich woman who called the police on me." The others shifted uneasily. "Django, forget him," one muttered. "You saw what he did. The man lifted you like a bag of rice." The others chuckled nervously, but the laughter died when Django slammed his fist on the table. "Never again," he shouted. "Nobody makes me kneel and walks free." He leaned back, breathing hard. "If he wants to protect her, then we'll attack where it hurts most, her company." A cruel grin crossed his face. "Let's see how the brown name shines after that." 3 nights later, Johnson was reviewing the security footage in the mansion's control room when the alarm beeped not from the house, but from the company's main warehouse in Ikeja. He sat up straight. "What's this?" The monitor flashed red. "Unauthorized entry detected." Without waiting for orders, Johnson grabbed his walkie-talkie. "Team Bravo, meet me at the main gate. Now." Within minutes, 2 black SUVs rolled out of the mansion, cutting through the quiet streets toward the warehouse. When they arrived, the front gate was wide open. The guards on duty were nowhere to be found. Johnson stepped out, scanning the shadows. His instincts kicked in every sound, every flicker of movement, every faint smell of smoke. Then he saw them. Django and his boys were inside the compound, loading boxes into a truck. "Stop right there," Johnson's voice thundered. The men froze. Django turned slowly, smirking. "So the street beggar wears a uniform now. Leave now while you can," Johnson warned. Django laughed, pulling out a metal rod. "No crowd to cheer for you tonight, champion." Johnson said nothing. His stance shifted slightly, left foot behind right. Weight balanced, shoulders loose. It was the posture of a trained fighter. Django swung first, Johnson ducked. The rod missed his head by inches. In a fluid motion, he grabbed Django's wrist, twisted it sharply, and sent the weapon clattering to the floor. The others rushed in. Johnson moved like lightning, a kick to the chest, a punch to the jaw, an elbow strike to the ribs. One after another, they fell. Django tried to grab him from behind, but Johnson flipped him over, sending him crashing into the truck. The sound echoed through the night. "Still want to play leader?" Johnson said, standing over him. Django groaned, clutching his side. His eyes darted toward the exit. The man he had once bullied was now the one he feared. "Get out," Johnson said. "And if you ever come near this place again, I won't stop halfway. Django stumbled to his feet, dragging his men away into the darkness. Johnson exhaled slowly, then turned to his guards. Call the police, and tell them the street leader has found his match. When Johnson returned to the mansion near dawn, Cynthia was waiting in her robe, worry written across her face. What happened? She asked. He explained everything, the alarm, the fight, the escape. Cynthia listened silently, her eyes glistening with tears of both fear and pride. You saved my company, she said softly. I only did what I had to, he replied. No, she whispered. You did what no one else could. And they cough. She took a deep breath. Johnson, there's something you need to know. That man, Django, he didn't just threaten me. He once cornered me outside my office, told me that the police were afraid of him because he owned them. I've been living in fear ever since. Johnson's jaw tightened. Then he picked the wrong woman this time. Cynthia smiled weakly. Maybe God sent you for a reason. She reached for his hand, and for a moment, their eyes met two people from completely different worlds, bound by danger and something deeper they both didn't yet understand. Before either of them could speak again, the house intercom buzzed. Madam, said a guard's shaky voice, there's someone outside the gate asking for you. He says he knows the man who attacked the company. Cynthia and Johnson exchanged a glance. Who? Johnson asked into the speaker. The guard replied, he said his name is Inspector Ojo and he has a warning. The room went silent. Cynthia's heart skipped. Johnson's hand moved instinctively toward his holster. Another twist was unfolding, and neither of them knew that this time the danger wasn't outside the gate. It was already closer than they thought. The mansion's gate opened slowly, creaking in the soft wind of early morning. The sky was still grey, the sun just beginning to rise over Lagos. Inspector Ojo stood by his car, his face unreadable. He was a tall man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His khaki shirt was neatly pressed, his badge gleaming in the dim light. Johnson and Cynthia approached him cautiously. Two guards flanked them, tense and alert. Good morning, Inspector, Cynthia greeted, her tone polite but wary. Good morning, madam, Ojo replied. His voice was calm, almost too calm. He turned to Johnson. And you must be the new security chief everyone's talking about. Johnson said nothing. He just gave a small nod, watching the man closely. His instincts buzzed, something about Ojo felt off. The inspector glanced around the compound, admiring the mansion. Beautiful home, he said. A shame someone would want to bring trouble here. What do you mean? Cynthia asked, her brows furrowed. Ojo's lips curved into a faint smile. Let's talk inside. This isn't a street conversation. Cynthia hesitated, but motioned for him to follow. Johnson stayed a step behind, his eyes never leaving the inspector's hands. The three of them sat in Cynthia's study. The morning light streamed through the large window, casting soft gold on the mahogany desk. Ojo placed a small folder on the table and leaned back. Last night, there was an incident at your warehouse in Ikeja, he began. I know, Cynthia said. My security team handled it. Ojo raised an eyebrow. Handled it? That's an interesting way to put it. From what my men reported, a few gang members were nearly hospitalized by one man. He turned to Johnson. That would be you, I presume? Johnson nodded slowly. They attacked first. I'm sure they did, Ojo said with a faint smirk. Still, your name wasn't on any company report. Funny how a man without an official record suddenly becomes the hero of the night. Cynthia frowned. Inspector, what exactly are you suggesting? Ojo shrugged. Nothing yet. Just doing my job. He opened the folder. But I'll tell you something interesting. The leader of that gang, Django, he's been on our radar for years. No one ever stood up to him before. Until last week, when this man, he gestured at Johnson, lifted him like a child. He paused, letting the silence hang. And now, Django's missing. Cynthia's breath caught. Missing? Ojo nodded. His men found his jacket near the river. Some say he fled. Others. His eyes flicked toward Johnson. Well, others say he didn't make it. Johnson's jaw tightened. I didn't kill him. I didn't say you did, Ojo replied smoothly. But people talk. And when people talk, we investigate. Cynthia leaned forward. Inspector, are you accusing him of something? Ojo smiled. I'm not accusing, I'm warning. Whoever fought those men last night has made enemies dangerous ones. Django may be gone, but his brother isn't. And he's worse. Johnson's eyes narrowed. Brother? Yes, Ojo said, standing slowly. His name is Kino, former military, ruthless. If Django was a snake, Kino is the cobra. He picked up his folder. Be careful, both of you, especially you, Chief. He looked Johnson dead in the eye. The streets talk fast. Kino knows your name now. With that, he walked out, leaving the air heavy with unease. After Ojo left, Cynthia turned to Johnson. Do you think he's telling the truth? Yes, Johnson said quietly. Every word. He walked to the window, looking out at the tall gate that now felt too thin to stop danger. If Django's brother is coming, he won't come to talk. Cynthia wrapped her arms around herself. Johnson, I can't go through this again. I've lived half my life afraid. He turned toward her, his voice steady. You won't be afraid anymore. Not while I'm here. Cynthia met his gaze, tears forming in her eyes. You always sound so sure. Because I've already lost everything, he said softly. When you've lived through that, fear doesn't control you anymore. She looked at him for a long time. Then, almost without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand on his arm. I don't know how to thank you. He smiled faintly. You already have. That evening, the compound was quiet. The guards were doubled at each gate. Johnson made his rounds carefully, checking every light and corner. By midnight, the sky was cloudless. The moon hung high, too peaceful, too silent. Then came the faint sound of tires on gravel. Johnson's hand moved to his pool. He signaled the nearest guard to cut the lights. They crouched behind the low wall. A black van rolled up to the gate, stopping just short of the security post. The driver didn't move. Who goes there? One guard called out. No response. Johnson motioned with 2 fingers, stay low. He approached the van slowly, his steps soundless. His instincts told him everything was wrong. When he was 10 feet away, the driver's door opened slightly. Then there was a loud sound. A flash of fire lit the night as a small explosive shattered the air. The guards dove for cover, shouting. The blast ripped through the gate, throwing dust and debris everywhere. Johnson rolled to the ground, ears ringing. The van door flew open, and 3 masked men jumped out, armed with pipes and machetes. Spread out, Johnson shouted. The fight was fast and brutal. Johnson disarmed the first man with a spinning kick, then blocked a machete swing with his forearm and countered with a punch that sent the attacker crashing into the wall. The third man lunged forward, blade gleaming in the moonlight. Johnson ducked, grabbed his arm, and flipped him over his shoulder. Cynthia, awakened by the noise, ran to the balcony. Johnson, she screamed. Get inside, he yelled back, still fighting. More men poured through the broken gate. The night turned into chaos. But Johnson fought like a man, possessed, every move precise, every strike controlled. When it was over, 5 men lay groaning on the ground. The rest fled into the darkness, dragging their wounded with them. Johnson stood, chest heaving, his face streaked with sweat and dust. Cynthia rushed out with 2 guards and froze at the sight, her mansion's gate blown open. And Johnson standing in the middle of it, a shadow of strength in the moonlight. Are you hurt? She cried. He shook his head. I'm fine. But who were they? Johnson looked toward the road, his voice low and cold. They came for a warning. Next time, they'll come for revenge. Cynthia's heart pounded. Johnson, what do we do now? He turned to her slowly. His eyes, calm but burning with resolve, met hers. Now, he said, we prepare for war. That night, Cynthia couldn't sleep. From her window, she could see Johnson outside, sitting by the broken gate. He wasn't just guarding the house, he was guarding her. And as the wind blew gently through the compound, one thought echoed in her heart. The man the streets mocked was the same man who now stood between her and danger. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how deep this battle would go. But one thing was certain, her life would never be the same again. The next morning, the mansion looked like a war zone. The front gate was shattered, the driveway scattered with metal fragments and footprints from the midnight attack. Cynthia stood at the balcony in a white robe, staring down at Johnson and the guards as they worked to rebuild what the explosion had destroyed. Her heart was still heavy from fear, but underneath the fear was something else, trust. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid because of the man protecting her. Madam? One of the guards said, looking up. Should we report to the police? Cynthia hesitated. The image of Inspector Ojo flashed in her mind, his calm smile, his strange tone. Something about that man didn't sit right with her. "No," she said firmly. "Not yet. We'll handle this quietly." Johnson looked up at her and nodded. "You're right. Whoever attacked last night knew the police would come late. Maybe they even counted on it." He walked closer, his face still calm, but his voice heavy with purpose. "We'll fix the gate, double the guards, and I'll personally train everyone on how to respond if they return." Cynthia watched him for a long moment. "Johnson," she said softly, "why do you still fight? After everything you've been through, after all you lost, why not walk away?" He smiled faintly. "Because walking away was what destroyed me before. I let them take everything once, my name, my home, my pride. I won't let that happen again. Not to you." Cynthia's throat tightened. "You've done more than anyone I've ever hired." "It's not about the job anymore," he said simply. "It's about what's right." That evening, Johnson received a call. A deep voice came through the line. "Chief," it said, "we found something at the old brown automobile warehouse, a note. It's addressed to you." Johnson frowned. "Read it." "No, sir," the guard said nervously. "You should see it yourself." Cynthia overheard and stepped closer. "What's happening?" "It might be another setup," Johnson said. "I need to check." "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. He tried to argue, but she shook her head. "This is my company. If danger is tied to it, I want to face it too." Minutes later, they were on the road again, Johnson driving, Cynthia in the passenger seat, the city lights flickering across her worried face. When they reached the warehouse, it was dark. The main gate hung loosely, as if forced open. The guards were nowhere in sight. "Stay in the car," Johnson said. "Johnson, please," he said, looking at her with quiet urgency. "Trust me." He stepped into the compound, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. And there it was, a piece of cardboard pinned to the door with a dagger. Written in rough red ink were the words, "The Cobra has come for the champion." Johnson's pulse quickened. "Keno!" Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind him. He turned too late. A metal rod struck his shoulder, sending him crashing to the ground. Shadows surrounded him. "Don't move," a voice hissed. Keno stepped forward, taller, stronger, colder than Django had ever been. A jagged scar ran across his neck. "So, you're the man who made my brother kneel," Keno said, his voice low. "You think you can humiliate my blood and live?" Johnson spat to the side, breathing hard. He humiliated himself. Keno's eyes darkened. "And now you'll die for it." Two of Keno's men dragged Johnson up, holding his arms tight. Keno reached for a knife tucked in his belt, but Johnson's mind was sharper than fear. In one swift motion, he stomped backward, slamming his heel into one man's knee. The man howled and fell. Johnson twisted free, grabbing the second attacker and hurling him into a stack of crates. The flashlight fell, rolling across the floor. The shadows danced wildly as the fight began. Keno swung his knife. Johnson blocked it with his forearm, grimacing as the blade grazed his skin. "You fight well," Keno growled, circling him. "Just like the stories say." Johnson stayed silent, his eyes locked on Keno's movements, every muscle ready. Keno lunged again. Johnson dodged, slammed his elbow into Keno's chest, then kicked his wrist, sending the knife flying. But Keno was no ordinary fighter. He tackled Johnson to the ground, fists pounding. Johnson blocked one blow, countered with a punch that cracked Keno's jaw, and rolled away. Breathing hard, both men stood, circling each other in the dim light. "This ends now," Johnson said. Keno smirked. "You're right. It's not true, serve. It's not true, serve." He whistled sharply. More men poured into the warehouse, 5, 6, 7 of them. Johnson's heart pounded. He glanced at the doorway. Escape was impossible, but before the men could reach him, the sound of tires screeched outside. The warehouse lights flicked on suddenly, flooding the room with brightness. Cynthia stepped out from the SUV. Police behind her, and at the front, surprisingly, was Inspector Ojo. "Drop your weapons," Ojo commanded, his gun raised. The gang froze. Keno's eyes burned with rage. "You again," he hissed. "I told you to stay out of this." Ojo smirked. "You think I came here for her?" He turned his gun slightly toward Johnson. Cynthia gasped. "Wait, what are you doing?" Johnson's stomach dropped. He saw it now. Ojo wasn't there to help. He was with Keno. "I told you, madam," Ojo said with a cold smile. "The streets talk fast. Some of us listen better than others." Keno grinned. "Good. Kill him, and it's over." Ojo raised his gun, but before he could pull the trigger, Johnson acted. He kicked a loose metal pipe from the floor. It flew, hitting the light switch. The warehouse went dark again. Gunshots echoed, screams followed. Johnson rolled behind a crate as bullets tore through the air. Using the darkness as his ally, he moved fast, silent, deadly. He disarmed one of the gunmen, grabbed the pistol, and fired at the floor. Sparks flew, disorienting his attackers. Keno charged blindly, slashing through the dark with a knife. Johnson caught his arm mid-swing and twisted, slamming him into a steel pillar. The knife clattered to the floor. Ojo tried to run, but Cynthia, trembling, grabbed a fire extinguisher and struck him from behind. The impact knocked him down. When the lights flickered back on, Johnson stood over Keno, breathing hard, gun steady in his hand. "Enough," he said quietly. "This ends here." Keno tried to rise, but Johnson fired a single shot, not to kill, but to shatter the ground beside him. The gang dropped their weapons. Police sirens wailed outside, real police this time, called by Cynthia before she followed Johnson. Hours later, the warehouse was sealed off. Ojo and Keno were handcuffed, dragged into police trucks under heavy guard. Cynthia and Johnson stood outside, the night finally calm again. "You saved my life," she whispered. He turned to her, his face soft but tired. "No, Ma, you saved mine too." They both smiled faintly, the kind of smile born from surviving together. The morning after the warehouse fight, the compound was quiet. For the first time in weeks, Cynthia could breathe. The police had taken Keno and Inspector Ojo into custody, and the chaos that once ruled her nights had finally ended. She stood by her bedroom window, watching Johnson from above as he trained the guards in the courtyard. His movements were calm, strong, graceful, the same way he had fought to protect her life. But it wasn't just his strength that moved her. It was the gentleness in his eyes afterward, the way he never bragged, never took credit, never spoke of what he had lost. That morning, something inside Cynthia shifted. For the first time, she saw him not as her protector, but as a man she needed to know beyond duty. Over the next few months, their bond deepened quietly. Cynthia found excuses to spend time in the garden whenever he was inspecting the gates. They talked about small things, the weather, the guards, her late father, but underneath those conversations grew something real. One evening, after a long day at the office, Cynthia found Johnson fixing a broken light in the hallway. Sweat glistened on his arms under the soft yellow bulb. She stopped and smiled. "You could have called someone to do that," she said. He chuckled. "I don't like waiting for what I can fix myself." She tilted her head slightly. "You talk like my father. Maybe your father and I would have been friends," he replied softly. Their eyes met. It was a long, quiet gaze that said more than words ever could. After that night, something unspoken hung in the air between them, warmth, admiration, a kind of quiet electricity neither dared to name. Weeks later, a soft rain began to fall over Lagos. Cynthia was on the balcony, sipping tea, when Johnson walked by to check the generator shed. She called out to him, "Johnson, can you come up for a moment?" He hesitated, then nodded and joined her upstairs. The rain drummed gently on the roof. The city below glowed with soft light. "You've been quiet lately," she said. He smiled faintly. "I'm just not used to peace." Cynthia looked at him carefully. "You know," she began slowly, "peace isn't just the absence of war. It's the presence of someone who makes you feel safe." He turned to her, unsure what to say. She continued, her voice trembling. "You've given me peace, Johnson. And I can't pretend anymore." He frowned gently. "Pretend?" She took a deep breath. "That I don't feel something for you." For a moment, he froze. The rain fell harder, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. "Cynthia," he whispered, voice barely audible. "You're my boss." She stepped closer. "Not tonight." Their eyes met, one filled with disbelief, the other with courage. "I know what you've been through," she said softly. "But your past doesn't make you unworthy of love." Johnson's voice broke slightly. "I lost everything once. I don't want to lose again." "Then don't," she said. "Hold on to me." And that night, Beneath the rain, their lips met slow, tender, full of the ache of two broken souls finding home in each other. 6 months later, Lagos buzzed with one headline: Brown Automobile CEO marries her chief security officer. The wedding was a spectacle the city had never seen. Christ the Light Chapel in Lekki was filled with guests, governors, entrepreneurs, and even street vendors who once watched Johnson sleep under the bridge. Cynthia walked down the aisle in a dazzling white gown, silver lace glimmering like moonlight. Her veil trailed behind her like soft clouds. Her necklace bore a single pendant engraved with 2 letters, J and C. Johnson stood at the altar in a crisp white tuxedo with gold trimming. His eyes brimmed with tears as he watched her approach. The man who once had nothing now stood tall, not because of wealth, but because he had found purpose and love. When the priest said, "You may kiss your bride," the crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. Even the guards at the mansion later danced around the compound, chanting, "Oga don marry madam." Their first years of marriage were filled with laughter, faith, and quiet joy until life tested them again. Year after year, no child came. Cynthia cried in secret some nights, afraid to disappoint him. She watched mothers cradle their babies and wondered if she would ever hold one of her own. Johnson never blamed her. He would hold her hand and whisper, "We already have something most people pray for, love that doesn't break." Still, the ache lingered. Doctors said everything looked fine. They prayed, waited, and hoped. Then, on the 5th year of their marriage, a miracle. Cynthia woke one morning, weak and dizzy. Johnson rushed her to the hospital. Hours later, the doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. You're going to be parents." Tears filled their eyes. Cynthia covered her mouth, trembling. Johnson fell to his knees beside her bed, his hands shaking as he whispered, "Thank you, God." After all this time, 9 months later, under the warm glow of a hospital light, 2 cries filled the room. Twin girls. Cynthia held the first baby, her eyes glistening. "She looks like you," she whispered. Johnson cradled the second, his tears falling freely. "No," he said softly. "They both look like hope." They named them Mimi and Mara, symbols of mercy and miracle. When they brought the twins home, the entire staff celebrated. The same mansion that once echoed with silence now rang with laughter, baby cries, and love. At night, Johnson would stand at the nursery door. Watching Cynthia rock the girls to sleep, she would look up at him and smile, whispering, "Can you believe? This is our life now?" And he would reply, "From the bridge to this home, grace brought me here." 5 years after that stormy night on the street, the story had come full circle. The same man, once mocked and beaten for being homeless, now played with his daughters on the same kind of street where his pain began, but this time, with joy in his heart and family by his side. Cynthia would often tell people, "Sometimes God hides kings in rags just to see who will see their worth before the world does." And Johnson? He would smile and say quietly, "Kindness brought me to love, and love gave me back my life." As the sun set behind their mansion, Mimi and Mara ran across the garden, their laughter echoing like music through the air. Cynthia leaned her head on Johnson's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that day he tore your coat?" she asked, smiling. Johnson chuckled softly. "Every day. That was the day God began to stitch my life back together." And as the evening breeze carried the sound of their children's laughter, the man once forgotten by the world finally knew what it meant to be home. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.